Adam, I'm going to pick on you next because you've been quiet for quite a while. But I'm also going to give you the opportunity to speak about your journey for creating family, any struggles that might have come along with that. But another theme that aligns with our next question has come up quite a bit as well. And since your story is different from our other three panelists, I think you can speak to this quite a bit. Talk about conversations with your partner as well.
Sure. So, honestly, first having the kids was relatively easy, which I'm very thankful for. So no real issues or concerns there. I will say my son had terrible colic. So the first year was awful. I cried a lot. My daughter was the exact opposite. She was easy peasy. That's changed as they've gotten older. But my theory is you pay it forward with the kids no matter what. So if you have an easy baby, they're going to be harder later on. Navigating conversations with a partner, totally different universe. Dating as a gay man with kids is not the norm. I can say I did not go on a date with a single person that had kids. And it's not even had conversations with people who had kids. It's just not super common. That to kind of juxtapose that. So my ex, who came out at the same time I did, she a lot of the women she dated did have kids or wanted to have kids. She got the question pretty commonly, like if she wanted more kids. I never got that question. So there's definitely differences there. So finding the right person took time. I will say it was a nice litmus test for somebody who would be a good fit for, because it's not just for me, right? Anybody I'm going to want to be with long term, going to introduce to the kids. There's that whole dynamic, and same goes for my ex. And then there's the extra complication of she and I having to figure out what that dynamic looks like, because we want to be on the same page in terms of who the kids are around and who they're exposed to, that sort of thing. So the good news is we're awesome co-parents. We get along super well. If anybody's thinking about having a family and wants a queer co-parent, I highly recommend it because it makes life easier. So that's been fairly easy to navigate. And both of us have been in relationships now for like roughly a year each. So they've each met the kids. They've been great with them. And it was definitely a different dynamic, and I think different kind of way to approach it in different parts of our community. So.
Adam, can I ask you a little bit more about your process of coming out at the same time as your ex-wife? I think that's an interesting dynamic for creating a family that I think even people in our community probably aren't all that familiar with. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I won't go into like gory details, but long story short, we came out to each other before we came out to anybody else. For a lot of, I would say, fairly obvious reasons to people on the phone here, our relationship wasn't working out, and we had issues long before we came out to each other. But that was kind of the initial impetus. We had that conversation with one another, and it was. You talk about conversations with your partner, right? So the conversation around, okay, what does our relationship look like moving forward? There's a lot of non-traditional marriages out there. Is that the direction you want to go? Am I bi? Are you bi? Like those sorts of discovery questions in much later part of life are maybe more common with folks older than us, but I will say I've got a lot of friends my age who've had very similar circumstances. We kind of came to where we wanted our relationship to go, which is where we are now. And then it was a question of telling everybody else, right? So immediate family, having the conversation with the kids. And I will say, like, kids, they could give a shit that we're gay. Like, that doesn't bother them. The divorce was hard for them to digest, and kind of changing lives was hard for them to digest. But them understanding that, like, hey, if you have a partner in the future, it's going to be a man, or if you have a partner in the future, it's going to be a woman. The beauty of children is it's not they had no preconceived notions there. We didn't raise them in a way that they might. So that was a relatively easy conversation, but kind of telling the broader universe took time. And eventually we did the kind of social media thing, but that was the last step for us.
Was that scary, Adam? Like coming out to wife? Or did she tell you first?
Yeah. So she told me first, and then I told her. So
that must have been such a burden,
so,
like off your shoulders.
It was still freaky, right? So like it was one of those. I still have it like seared into my memory, like this moment that it happened, right? It was actually in this room I'm standing in now, where I confronted her. I won't go into the background, but like I was like, hey, is something going on here? She told me, and then I told her. So it was a huge relief. And then like a day later, like, okay, now what? So it was a great unburdening for both of us, I think. But it was kind of a long process and a difficult process to actually like come out the other side.
They don't make compasses for that.
No, yeah, that's and we're pretty atypical, right? I know, like I said, I've got a lot of friends who came out later in life. She has friends who came out later in life. It's just unusual that we both did. But would recommend, if you're going to come out later in life, hopefully you married somebody else who's gay too.
I appreciate you finding the silver lining in this situation. That's great. So I apologize for the barking bulldog in the background. So we're now getting to the point where we're going to do a little bit of reflection. And if you would like to answer both of these questions together or separately, I leave that up to the panelists. What advice would you have for someone who's trying to build their own family? And our time machine question, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to yourself? And I'm also curious, would it be the same advice? And let's start with Brian.
Yeah, I would say if you're looking to start a family, know that there's so many different ways to do it, right? Surrogacy, adoption, like Adam's story is very unique. Like there's no right or wrong way to start a family as long as like you love your child and you're raising them. I think that's a beautiful thing. And so I think that was something that an advice I would actually tell myself back in the day was just like, there's no right or wrong way, right? Because you wanna try and build your perfect family. And I think all of us can attest there's no perfect family. We're all just trying to figure it out day by day. And so I think it's okay to just like not put the pressure on yourself and just understand that like if you want to build a family, there's so many different ways to get there. The other advice I would have given myself too is that it's not a straight parallel like line to get there, right? It's not a straight path. Like we had to do curves and U-turns and turn, and we got to the end result that we wanted to. I think Stephen talked about it before. Like once they put the baby in your hand, like it's such a beautiful thing, and you actually forget all the shit you went through to actually try and create your family. And so I would say to just be patient with yourself and your partner. Capitalize on all the resources that do exist now. Thankfully, with the LGBT community creating family, there's a lot of help and resources out there. Again, no matter how you're trying to create your family. And just know that it's all going to be worth it once they put that baby in your arms. Because like Stephen, my partner and I were able to be in the same room because Kenzie was born in November 2019 before the pandemic. And so actually my partner and I were both in the room and my parents. And my parents have 2 other grandchildren and they actually weren't able to be in the room before. So that was like a beautiful moment I think for all of us. And then thankfully, Ollie was born in June 2021 when vaccines were on the up. So we actually were allowed in our hospital because our babies were born in Little Rock. That's where our surrogate was. And so, yeah, again, it's all worth it. And so just be patient, understand that there's resources, and just know that baby or child or whatever's entering your home, it's going to be beautiful, and, be patient.
Thank you, Brian. Sarah, are you back from taking care of hungry baby?
Oh, I'm currently taking care of hungry baby, but I'm here.
Awesome.
I'd say the advice that I would give, both to anybody who's considering this as well as to my younger self would be sort of, Brian, you mentioned there's so many different routes that people can go to create a family, and I think that's both very liberating in some ways, but it can also be really paralyzing to have so many different options. And so the advice that I would give would just be to give it time to explore the different options, to really be honest with yourself and with your partner, if you have a partner, about what it is that you like and don't like about the different options. I mean, the example that I gave of going to the foster care training and really coming away from that feeling like, I don't think this is right for us. We had to have a really honest conversation about why that was. And then just all the self-exploration that I did about whether or not I wanted to actually be pregnant. Hey, baby, you want to say hi to everybody? This is Maisie. So that would be, my advice is just to really give it that time. And then to ask for advice from folks. We talked to a couple who had used a known donor who was a friend, just like we did. We talked to a couple who went through a sperm bank. We talked to a gay couple who, the guy who ended up being our donor, who had adopted his daughter. So people who had gone through all different kinds of routes and hearing their experiences, and that was really helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And hi, Maisie. You were just so precious. My goodness. Adam, how about you? Either advice to folks looking to start their own families or advice to your former self?
Sure. So the only thing I'm jealous of Sarah and the newborn is like that newborn smell is something you cannot get anywhere else. It's like such a magical odor. I don't know. Anyway, weird.
You mean
aside.
when they're clean? When they're clean, Adam.
Right. Exactly. Yes, I do mean that. Yes, exactly. Like hearkening back here. Yeah, I mean, I think the advice I'd give, it's kind of echoes what Brian said. There is no right way to do this. And I think the plus, and I think all of our stories reflect this, if you do it a different way, somebody has probably already been there before, right? So I've networked with people who've come out later in life and had to tell their children. You all have networked with folks who've either done non-traditional or surrogacy routes or whatever the case might be. So I think the plus is there are resources in the community. And, even though it may feel like you're forging your own path, in many ways you might be with your family and with your friends and with your immediate community. The plus of more people being kind of out now is there's all different paths and all different ways that we've created family. And there's not necessarily blueprints, but people you can seek advice from who've been in similar circumstances to you. I think advice to my younger self, honestly, is that really things turn out for the better at the end of the day. I've had these discussions that, probably like other folks that are elder millennials have been to plenty of therapy, where you kind of hold two things at once, where I hold regret of not coming out earlier, but I also look at my kids and think I wouldn't have wanted to do it any other way. So it's hard to necessarily reconcile those two, but I also don't have to. So, I think I'll just go back to my original point that the advice is kind of see what feels right to you or to you and your partner, and then see what resources exist to kind of support you exploring those decisions together.
Yeah, I really like those points. Really great points from everyone here. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction with this. I'm going to answer the question, Gordon. I'm going to answer a different question than the ones you asked, but related, which is, what did you learn from this process? And there are two things that come to mind. One, do say gay. And what I mean by that is you have to advocate for yourself. For example, when we were at the hospital, they only give out 2 bands. Why 2 bands? Because traditionally there's a mother and a father. And so there are 2 bands. But what about when you have a surrogate who's giving birth and 2 partners? Who gets the 2 bands? This is an example of something you may never have thought of, but throughout the journey, built in are unfair processes and systems that in some cases discriminate against LGBT families. I am not the activist type. I never have been, but I have learned to be an advocate. And so I think part of this journey requires that we advocate, requires that even those of us who are not ones to be as loud about things, you have to get loud if you want to be a parent. You're going to have to stand up for what you and your parent are doing and for your child. And some things aren't fair. And part of it is, you know what, we have to do our part to make it right, to make it better, not just for us and our families, but for all the families out there. The second thing that I learned is that it's a business, that whether you go the adoption route or the surrogacy route, or even Adam, your route, there are people who genuinely want to help, but who make money off the process. It is a business, and you really have to do your homework. You have to look at ratings and reviews, and then not trust ratings and reviews, and then interview people who have used those providers, go on social media, ask about people's experiences, and make the best decision you can, knowing that it's a business, that you're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to people that, while they may be good-hearted, also want to make money off the process. And if my husband and I often say we should write a book about everything we learned, the people who were good and the times that we got burned. And I think I wish I knew that earlier in the process, that as much as this is a beautiful process and there are people who want to help you, that a lot of people are making a lot of money off of this. And you want to keep that in mind, just as you would with any kind of big decision that you're going to pursue in your life.
Really interesting observations and lessons learned. Thank you, Stephen. For the rest of the folks who were on the Zoom call with us, if you have any questions that you would like, please post them in the chat box. To our panelists, Woody asked a question that anyone who would like to answer, I'd actually love to hear from all of you. Have you or your children had to deal with any negativity surrounding the "I have two mommies" or two daddies, and how did you or plan to approach dealing with that?
I can start. Thankfully, no, but we also proactively put ourselves in a community that we knew wouldn't make it an issue, right? So we actually have a lot of lesbian parents and gay parents and hetero, like there's a whole just a mix of people. How I will spin that question is, now we are getting to the point where we need to teach Kenzie the term mom and dad, right? So she hears a lot of her friends call if they have mothers, mommy. So now she's attributed mommy with women. So she'll walk up to a woman and say, "Hi, mommy, can I have this?" And so we're working through that. It's super innocent right now, and it's not a big deal or a red flag, but like these are things that you don't even think would happen, right? But in her mind, she just thinks now women are mommy. And so that's something. But I would just say, no, we put ourselves in a community proactively that we're like-minded, that would be welcoming. And luckily for us, knock on wood, we're only 2.5 years, 3 years into this, but we haven't had any issues or anyone like looking at us in a different way, which is good. But we want our kids to be raised to know that every family looks different. As long as you have people that take care of you and look after you, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Obviously, we haven't had to. Maisie hasn't had to deal with that yet, but we also put ourselves in that community pretty intentionally, and it's one of the benefits of living in super liberal Seattle. It's very queer friendly, and when we were pregnant, we joined a queer birth class and a queer like parenting group. So that was really helpful. It was run through the midwife who we used to help us conceive. And they actually just published a book called Queer Conception. And they have virtual queer parenting groups. So I can drop a link in the chat to their book, and they're giving a talk, and I think next week. There's a virtual link to that as well if anybody's interested in that. But just being surrounded by other queer families who are on the same journey was really helpful. When we were going through that process, to know that we weren't the only ones out there. What do you think about it?
I'll add. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
I've dealt with this a couple times. once with my daughter's teacher, who said only a man and a woman can get married, and that was a whole discussion that came back home because she argued with her teacher and she got in trouble. It was the whole thing. So it was a conversation with us and her relatively conservative teacher that went okay, I would say. And I think as the kids get older, it's come up more frequently. They contextualize it, I think, in a good way. So my son, you know, is like, compares himself to other parents with divorced parents, you know, that have boyfriends and girlfriends and, you know, stepmoms and stepdads and all that kind of stuff, which I think helps that they're kind of contextualizing it in modern family concepts as opposed to anything else. And then I think the only other instance I've had, actually after coming out, I was the chair of our private school board, and a group of parents tried to get me kicked off the board, but that I fortunately did not have to deal with that. The rest of the board dealt with it for me, which was nice. So a little bit, but you know, not a lot.
Adam, I just am so upset to hear about those experiences, but at the same time, I'm sure everyone on the panel will admit this is just part of being a parent. We're going to deal with this kind of stuff, and it's not right and it's not fair, but we just have to develop thick skin. And I think that, Woody, to your point, you know, one of the questions we get asked is, which one of you is the mommy? And when we were asked that question the first time, you're kind of like taken aback, you're insulted, but then you have to come up with an answer. And so our answer is, you're the mommy. And so we kind of use that as a way to, whether it's, you know, a man or a woman, sometimes they're ignorant, sometimes they're intolerant, sometimes they're just curious. And I think our default is to try to, unless there's some reason to believe otherwise, we try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they probably haven't seen this a lot, or they're not educated about it. So instead of getting upset and angry, we have little jokes or comments that we use to try to deflect it and not turn it into a big situation. And if it's appropriate, try to educate. Now, obviously, if it's a dangerous situation, that's something different entirely. But for the most part, you know, people are just curious or unsure. And I think developing answers like FAQs that you and your partner want to use is the best thing we've been able to do. And I could think of half a dozen questions that we get asked, and you just develop an answer to them and you practice them and you get comfortable with them. Just like the story you're gonna have to tell your child. When your child asks you, where did I come from? You're gonna have to have a story for her or him. And so that's something else you end up learning and practicing and working through with your partner. And I think, Woody, that's just part of being an LGBT parent, that we have to figure out what stories we're going to tell, what we're comfortable sharing about our families, and then practicing it so that when it happens, you have that answer and you're more prepared, or as prepared as you can be.
So are there any other questions from the audience and attendees or panelists?
Sarah, did you save money by adopting an older child? That was something I kind of thought of like, wow, that would be such like a bargain to like just skip the expensive part.
Yeah, yeah, that certainly wasn't the driving factor, but it was an absolute benefit of it. Adopting someone who's not a minor, we didn't have to go through any kind of agency. We didn't have to have home visits or any assessment of any kind. The three of us went to the clerk of court and you know, signed some paperwork, and that was it. So it was a shockingly easy process.
That's awesome. Sarah, did you have to deal with any of the, going back to Woody's question about the two mommies, two daddies comments, did you face anything like that with your older child?
No, not really. I think more people have just been kind of curious about what motivated us to adopt someone who is older, you know, rather than anything else. And Tam is queer as well, so it's just like one big happy queer family. We'll see what happens with Maisie.
Right. Are there any other questions for our panelists? All All right. So as we begin to wrap up our evening together, first, I would like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their very busy schedules between parenting, being a partner, working, and all of that. Thank you all for joining us tonight and sharing your stories with us. One of the moments that popped into my head while you all were speaking was actually based off a comment that Stephen made earlier about how when we were in college, this wasn't really an option. And I remember being a US student and just accepting the fact that I would never be able to get married, much less have children or a family. And the path of change that has happened over the last 20 or so years, and hearing your stories to prove that point is really inspiring. And I hope that our attendees that are here tonight and the folks who will watch this video later on will find hope in your stories, because these are interesting times for our community, to say the least. And I think by uplifting and sharing stories like the four that we have heard tonight, it's a reminder of how far we have come, but how much work we still need to do, and how we really need our families, whether they're the ones we came from, the ones we chose, or the ones that we created to help us along the way. So once again, thank you everybody for coming this evening. Thank you all. Once again, if you are interested in donating to our scholarship fund, the link is on the screen, or you can also access it by visiting our website at www.uflgbtqalumni.com. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
Thanks, everybody. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thanks, everyone.